All right, let's just get right into it. Today, we're looking at what is arguably the most tragic, absolutely foundational history of the Second Age. Think of this as a sprawling mythological documentary. We're going to chart the breathtaking civilization that existed long before the world we actually know. We're going to explore exactly how a spectacular golden age of humanity, a society blessed with near endless gifts, was just utterly drowned in the abyss, an event that literally changed the physical shape of the world forever. So how on earth did such a pinnacle of civilization vanish so completely? To really anchor ourselves here, let's look at the timeline. It all starts in year 32, with the founding of Numenor. Fast forward a bit, and by year 500, Sauron begins to stir, officially establishing Mordor in year 1000. Centuries pass, and then in 3261, a guy named Ar-Pharazôn seizes power, which directly leads to the ultimate, catastrophic fall of Numenor in 3319. All right, part one, the Island of Gift. This was quite literally a divine reward for men. So this land was bestowed upon the fathers of men after the total defeat of the first Dark Lord, Morgoth. Picture this, if you will. A magnificent star-shaped island, a massive pentangle with 5 distinct peninsulas just reaching out into the sea. And right there in the center region, known as the Inlands, stood a towering, steep mountain called Meneltarma, the Pillar of Heaven. Right at its peak was an unroofed temple completely hallowed to Eru Iluvatar, the supreme creator. From that breathtaking center, the great royal lineage began. The men of this island, known as the Dunedain, were granted unnatural, incredibly long lives. They were led by their very first king, Elros. Now, you might recognize that name because he's actually the brother of the elven lord Elrond. Elros ruled his mortal subjects from this glorious, glittering citadel called Armanelos, which was nestled right near the roots of that holy mountain. Moving into their golden age, these people became the absolute masters of the sea and wisdom. And boy, did they master the sea. The Numenorians quickly became the ultimate mariners of the entire world. Through deep study and instruction, they built these immense, absolutely magnificent swan-proud ships. They were totally fearless, sailing out to explore the deep, uncharted waters of the Great Sea. Those early days, pure paradise. The island was constantly blessed with sweet, fragrant breezes and just perfect weather. You had these incredible evergreen trees, like the golden-leaved, silver-barked maulern, just flourishing everywhere. And whenever those massive swan ships drew near the shores, they were welcomed by the joyful cries of countless seabirds. They grew ridiculously wealthy, too, returning from Middle-earth heavily laden with silver and gold. Eventually, the king's men became these mighty lords, gathering tribute from the ancient Wilderlands. But here is the turning point. Sauron's cunning deception and how a creeping, agonizing fear of death took root. So the absolutely crucial thing to understand here is this divine boundary called the Ban of the West. The Valar laid down a very strict rule. Numenorians were explicitly forbidden from sailing west, out of sight of their own coasts. Why? Well, they didn't want them seeing the Undying Lands and coveting the immortality of the gods and elves. But as the Numenorians' power and pride swelled up, ironically, so did their fear of mortality. It became an agonizing obsession. They fiercely resented being doomed to die while the elves just got to live on forever. Think about it. The wealthiest, most powerful men in the entire world were completely paralyzed by the fear of something as natural as death. Driven by all this mounting pride and fear, the last, and supposedly greatest, king, Ar-Pharazôn, decides he's going to challenge Sauron. Now, Sauron had been busy building immense power over in Middle-earth, so Ar-Pharazôn sails over with a military force so unbelievably massive that Sauron's armies literally just flee in terror. Sauron actually surrenders. The king then brings the Dark Lord back to Numenor as a hostage. On paper, it sounds like the ultimate victory, right? Actually, it ends up being the single most disastrous mistake in the entire history of men, because Sauron didn't need a single weapon or army to destroy them. Hoping to accomplish by cunning what he obviously couldn't achieve by sheer force, he just used his malice. He slowly, methodically poisoned their hearts and minds from the inside out. Sauron was a master manipulator. He exploited their deepest, darkest vulnerability, that desperate yearning for unending life. He totally convinced them that the Valar were just withholding everlasting life out of petty jealousy. And in no time, he turned this beautiful island into a terrifying theocracy of dark worship, setting himself up as the high priest. Finally, as the king felt old age creeping in, Sauron pushed him over the edge. He urged Ar-Pharazôn to build the greatest armada the world had ever seen, to sail west, break the divine ban, and just wrest everlasting life from the gods by force. Which brings us to the great cataclysm, the absolute wrath of the West. When this massive, blasphemous armada actually set sail, that perfect, sweet weather of the island, it vanished completely. In its place came these deeply ominous, terrifying warnings. We're talking violently darkened skies, brutal hailstorms, and these massive, eagle-shaped clouds that just loomed in the sunset, bearing lightning right beneath their wings. It was the clear, undeniable wrath of the Valar, but they just completely ignored it. The tension at this point built into pure, visceral terror. You have to imagine the remaining Numenorians just standing on the shores, watching the apocalyptic sunset being completely blotted out by those massive, eagle-shaped thunderclouds. That's the moment they finally realized the sheer, horrifying scale of the doom they had just brought upon themselves. Faced with this unimaginable blasphemy, a mortal fleet actually arriving on their shores, the Valar did something unprecedented. They essentially laid down their delegated rule over the earth and appealed directly to Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme creator himself. And Eru intervened. He fundamentally changed the fashion of the entire world. A great, roaring chasm just ripped open in the sea, right between Numenor and the Deathless Lands. The king's quote-unquote invincible armada was drawn instantly down into the abyss and completely swallowed. Meanwhile, back on the island, fire burst from the holy mountain Meneltarma as the very foundations of the land gave way, and that glorious star-shaped kingdom toppled straight into darkness. The ancient lore describes this incredibly heart-wrenching scene. The roaring, icy waves swallowed absolutely everything. Queen Tarmiriel herself desperately tried to climb the steep ways of the mountain to seek sanctuary, but she was overtaken by the water. Every beautiful hall, every single jewel, all their music and centuries of hard-won wisdom just swallowed by the mounting waves, vanished forever. But it wasn't the end of everything. Let's look at the survivors in Middle-earth, the remnants of the fall. From this utter annihilation, a split legacy was born. A small group of men known as the Faithful, led by Elendil the Fair and his sons Isildur and Anarion, had firmly refused to worship the darkness. They managed to escape on ships just as the catastrophe hit, riding these towering, mountainous waves all the way to the shores of Middle-earth. But what about Sauron? Well, he got caught in his own trap. His beautiful physical body was completely crushed and destroyed in the abyss. He could never again appear fair or charming to men, but his dark spirit survived. It rose out of the deep like this terrifying black wind and fled straight back to his stronghold in Mordor. Now, those faithful survivors didn't just sit around lingering in the ashes. Elendil and his sons used the ancient lore they managed to save and went on to found the truly legendary kingdoms of Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. They established these magnificent, towering cities like Osgiliath and Minas Honor, setting up the great domains of men that would defend the world for centuries to come. But the world itself, it was fundamentally forever altered. The undying lands were removed from the physical circles of the earth completely, and the world was transformed from a flat realm into a round, finite globe. It became inescapable save by death. No mortal mariner, no matter how skilled, could ever accidentally stumble upon paradise again. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder. Think about this for a second. If Numenor had never reached such breathtaking heights and never fallen to such catastrophic, arrogant depths, Elendil and his sons would never have been cast upon Middle-earth to build Gondor. And Sauron? He would never have been stripped of his fair form, forced to forge an empire of pure malice. Without the drowning of this one incredible island, would the ultimate conflict over the One Ring have ever even happened? It just goes to show how the deepest, most devastating tragedies often set the stage for the greatest acts of heroism. What an absolute game changer of a story.